Okay, hopefully this works and we're on. Hello everyone. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Landy Kennedy Nasser, pediatrician, and today we have a really special guest. And so I've been wanting to have this talk for quite some time because I think speech is one of the most common questions I get asked about, especially it's really important for children's development, of course, and just communication. And so our guest today is Sean Ferguson, who's a speech therapist, and I'm going to let Sean introduce himself because usually they're better at that than I am.
Thank you, Dr. Elena.
Yeah.
So I'm Sean Ferguson. I run a private practice here in Houston called Life Skills Therapy. We specialize in speech therapy, and what we do is we help kids communicate. We focus on early intervention. We work with kids of all ages, all pediatrics, and one of our mottos is if children are laughing, they're learning. So we focus a lot on just having fun, teaching parents. It's a lot of caregiver training because generally we're only there twice a week for speech therapy, and the parents need to do the other therapy when we're not available to be there every day. So
it's actually a really good point, and from my standpoint, I've actually referred to Sean quite a bit because parents come back and tell me, oh my gosh, my little one loves Sean. And I was like, if they like their therapist, they're going to get a lot more out of it. And if your child goes to some sort of therapy and they hate it the whole time, you usually do not get nearly the bang, I think, for your buck. And so that's important. Just like your pediatrician, like you should hopefully like your doctor or your pediatrician. And so it's important that they also like their speech therapist because they're trying to help them learn to communicate or at least express their communication.
yes.
So I have a bunch of questions, so
Sure.
I was going to start, and then if anyone else has questions, you feel free to pop in or ask us later, and we can always answer your question. We're good at email.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's start with the basics.
Yes.
Ages and expectations. And so, I'll have a little 12-month-old in the office and ask the parents, so do they say anything? And they're like, not really. I'm like, what about ba, ka, ma, da, sounds at least? And so, from your standpoint as a speech therapist, what are, your baseline expectations? And starting at, say, 12 months and onward.
Sure, 12, yeah. So starting at 12 months, what you expect is a child to say mama, dada, they have those two words, and then in addition, they should have 2 to 6 words that they're saying. And when we say words, it's not that they said it once, then you never heard it again, but it should be consistent. So they might be saying ba for ball, they might be saying key cat for kitty cat, something along those lines, but it should be consistent. It might not be the adult form, but it should be something that they're continuing to use consistently.
And I think that's actually an important point, is it doesn't, my daughter always said kaku for cookie,
Mm-hmm.
and that counts. And
Yes.
so it doesn't necessarily have to be the correct word. It literally can be ba for ball,
Sure.
but they always call the ball ba. And I feel like at 12 months, they don't even have to specifically call mama, mama, or dada, dada, because sometimes they don't quite yet
Sure.
do that, but at least they normally have been able to put those two sounds together. And so they're making more of those sounds together, mama, dada, baba, those sorts of things. But they normally start soon repetitively calling the same object a word, even if that word isn't really a word.
Even if it's a childlike approximation. What we see is there's stages of babbling.
Mm-hmm.
So children start with cooing and they're making vowels, then they'll move on to making maybe single syllables. So it might be ba or pa or ba, and then it moves on to a duplicated ba ba pa pa.
Right.
And then it's variegated, so then they start mixing up pa ba, pa ka, ma ba, things like that. And so if your child's babbling and seems to be talking to themselves, encourage that. That's a wonderful thing for them to be doing. What I encourage parents a lot is to interpret what the kid's saying. So you take the context. If the child's playing with a ball and they say baga, then you can say ball go, and then you think, oh, he said baga, ball go. And so we're thinking along the lines of, they may not have been thinking that, but we're basically putting communication into that interaction. So as much as we can, we're just thinking of kind of repeating, celebrating communication, and then giving it back to the child, and then it becomes a turn-taking communicative interaction.
Right.
And there's a lot of joy in that. You
Right.
see just the smiles light up. The kids are happy. Parents are happy.
Mm-hmm.
I see a lot of the kids that I start with are parents that are frustrated. They're saying, my child's not communicating, or I don't understand. They're crying. They have a hard time making transitions. What can we do? And so we start by finding activities that interest the child, and we build communication off of that.
Okay. And then what about 15 months? So by 15 months, normally that's the next visit after 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
And normally by then we're like, what about 7 to 20 words? And, or is that speech starting to come along? And to that end, the second question I have, because I noticed a trend, and I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like girls seem to be more communicative earlier than boys. Nothing against the little boys. But I'll have some 18-month-old little girls in, and they are just cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha. And then I'll have an 18-month-old little boy come in right afterwards and nothing.
Very quiet, yes.
And so, tell me what your thoughts are. So 15-month-old to 18-month-old
yes.
and little boy.
So 15 to 18 months. So we said at 12 months you're going to have 2 words plus the, mama, dada, or words that approximate mama, dada for mommy and daddy, plus 2 to 6 more words. From then to 15 months, you're looking at about 25 words, up to 18 months, about 50. By 2 years is an explosion, and you're wanting 200 to 300 expressive words from your child. So it's a big leap forward. Let's see, so...
and what do you think, girls versus boys?
Yeah,
do you
exactly.
Notice the same trend?
I do see the same trend. So
you get more
let me grab some of my toys. I brought some fun stuff. And so this appeals to boys and girls because it's cookies, but you can make these cookies.
Okay.
And it's just some fun props. But a lot of the boys are more into their physical activities.
Okay.
So we're like, racing cars, we're running to get the cars, we'll say car go, run and chase the cars. I think girls seem to be more interested in the interaction, right? So they want to have like tea parties even as young as 2 years old. The food toys, they're able to sit and focus. Now a lot of the kids I see for speech therapy, they're not as able to stay with an activity as a typically developing child just because they're having a hard time paying attention. There's a language burden on them, and so they're getting up and moving away. But even, it's a general rule, yes, the girls are communicating more than the boys.
All right, so there's no reason to really freak out about that.
No, not at all. No, not at all. No reason to be freaked out if your child is a little delayed. I mean, the best thing to do is to at least, ask some questions and perhaps get an evaluation if that's where you're at. It's always good to know where you're at with the child. But yeah, these are fun. I'll just, since I booked these out, these are great. We have a lot of fun activities. But, little girls and boys love this. But you can,
so we're having a speech
cut
lesson?
the cookies. Yeah,
yes.
We have a little speech lesson here. Let's see. All right, well, let me get everything out then. So we've got the icing, we've got the cookies.
Okay, so this is fun.
Yes, this is fun. All right, so the first thing we do, we show them the back of the tray. Oh, look, it's got all the things we can do. So it says, okay, we already got the cookies out. Here's the cookies. Next thing we got to do is cut the cookies. So get the knife out, set this down. We can cut them up. It's fun for boys and girls. You can say, and depending on their language level, so they might say cut. We just say, okay, let's take turns. We say cut. And then if they're not even doing that, we might say my turn. Hand the knife to the child. Let them take a turn. So your turn, Dr. Elena.
Thank you. Good. You broke it. Yeah, it's actually harder than it looks.
Yeah, it is. Some of these are tough. Okay. I put them on the tray. Okay. And once we've got all the cookies cut and on the tray, we bake them. We bake them in the oven. We pretend to turn the oven on. So the activities vary depending on the child's language level. So
but this is something super easy parents can do at home.
Oh, yeah,
but the whole idea is that you show them the cut and you're saying the word cut.
Yeah,
and you show them the bake and you show them put in the oven and you try to get them to emulate that activity and try to say the word cut, cut, cut.
Exactly. We're saying cut cookie, and then later we're making selection. Hey, do you want the candy cookie? A lot of kids don't know vanilla, but they do know chocolate. So we'll say, do you want the candy cookie or the chocolate? They'll pick, oh, I want this cookie, I want chocolate, I want candy. And so, we're making the cookies, we make it fun. The activities change, though, depending on the language level of the child. So, to get back to your question about, age levels, so by the time children are turning 2, what we look at in speech therapy isn't necessarily words, they're called morphemes, but to make it as simple as possible, just say by 2 years, they should be really consistently using 2 words, together. By 3 years, you're seeing like 3 to 5 words, and so there's a big explosion there as well. So they might, for a 18-month-old who's new in therapy, we might just say cut or cookie or more cookie, things like that as we're doing this activity. As children develop their language, we might say I cut cookie or my turn cookie or put cookie here. So we just look at kind of what the child's able to say, what they're interested in saying, and try to build language on that.
Okay. And then what about, because we have a lot of dual language families.
Oh, yes.
And so, for example, if a language spoken in your home might be Spanish or Russian or Romanian or some other language that is less commonly spoken even in the United States, where Spanish is pretty commonly spoken. But are we expected to see that, yes, that child might have an expressive speech delay? And so to that end, I think also making the point that there's a difference between receptive language, which is where they're understanding everything you're saying. Like they might understand the idea of the cutting the cookie and understand everything that he says, but they're not able to express it. And so I do want to touch on expressive versus receptive language. And then the second question is dual language families,
Yes. Oh my gosh, this
are
is
we
great information. Great
supposed
question.
to be expecting them to be a little bit behind?
Yes, so I'll start with the dual language families because
Okay.
that's a really simple one answer. And typically, yes, we do see language delay with kids who are bilingual, who grew up in bilingual home. That's okay. The thing to do is just try to figure out what language is their stronger language. Which one? Not only they generally will understand both, and I'm bilingual, so I work with a lot of Spanish-speaking families.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of these kids I see are actually watching a lot of TV, and so they may be stronger in English, whereas the parents are sometimes stronger in Spanish. Which can be a challenge for communication. But what I try to do is find what is the strongest language of the child. What are they saying? What words are they? What phrases are they saying? What words are they saying? And we build language on top of that using their preferred language. So typically, what you see is the kids lag behind. So if the typical language trajectory is kind of going up like this with a normal child, a dual language learner might be. I'll see if I can simulate that. A little bit delayed, right? But then they've got a big bump up at some point, and when they sort of convalesce and all their language comes together. So.
Right, and I mean, I think I would make the strong argument that I'd rather them be a little bit language delayed and learn two language because the brain is so.
Yeah.
I mean, the ability to understand different language is, and we put actually a YouTube video, a TED Talk about this, about the linguistic ability of babies, and they're really quite remarkable. And so, like, your ability to absorb a new language is greatest in those first few years, and then it falls off like crazy. So, by the time you get to my Spanish college experience, I mean, I didn't get much out of it.
Yeah.
Like, so unless you use it. And so, if they can be exposed to that dual language, I really strongly encourage parents to not unexpose them.
Oh,
at all.
absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a wonderful thing. I mean, think of the trajectory you're setting your kids up for as far as like the success in the workforce by having two languages. I mean, that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. So even if it's a Colombian nanny.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, and I work with so many of those, and it's wonderful because I'm able to communicate with the nanny and help the child, and usually their strong language is English, but they understand Spanish, and so let's.
And I use Colombian because our nanny happened to be from Colombia, and she was awesome. My kids ended up speaking two languages. So we had one question, and it says, yes, so we have a little one who wants to talk in babbles. Can you scoot over a little bit? And can't seem to put it together. So, yeah, so the question is, what do you do with, say, almost 2-year-old, an 18 to 2-month-old, who they just gibberish? They babble, but they still yet, and we're going to go on the presumption that the child can hear.
Yes, sure.
And all those things. So you have more of a just gibberish speaker between 18 months and 2. You can tell they want to say stuff that's not coming out. So this goes back to the expressive language. Their receptive language is good.
Yes, so they understand everything, but they're having a hard time putting the words together. And this speaks to your point earlier about learning language. Children at that age, the brain is a sponge. It's so neuroplastic, and so. They are able to learn, and what we need to do as parents, as caregivers, as therapists, as doctors, is find out what it is that inspires this kid. So if your child is rolling a ball and might say like ba 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 ba, then you can say, yeah, that's the ball. And again, you find that, or you find that sound that they're saying, and you connect it linguistically with the activity that they're doing. If any sort of pretend play is a huge thing. So I like to, we've got our stuffed animals here. Kids love elephants, and this is because, yeah, of course you guys love elephants, yeah. So we can feed our elephant a cookie, for example. We do lots of pretend play around that. Here it is. So we can say like, eat cookie, eat, nom, 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 nom. And we pretend, I'm gonna eat the cookie, nom, 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 nom. Mommy's turn, so everyone takes turns. One of the biggest things, if the children are not able to, put it together with language, is to really take turns with them with any sort of activity, starting with simple stuff like rolling a ball, and then building up onto more pretend play. Things like eating, like drinking, like cooking. That stuff's more advanced than simple things like rolling a ball or rolling a car.
So then, is the first goal to get their babbling to make sense? So if they are going to say "ba" for ball, at least they are consistently going "ba" for ball.
Sure, absolutely. Even before that, though, is turn taking. One of the acronyms I love is ROCK, R-O-C-K.
R-O-C-K.
And so you can make your experience with your kid rock in that you are. So the first one is we're reaching out to the child to communicate with them. Okay. The next one is we're offering opportunities for them to communicate. The next one is we're cueing. So we're saying. Like, oh, your turn, or we might say, eat cookie. So we'll model. We'll give them the words that they should be saying.
Okay.
And then the final one is keep going. So we just keep going with this activity. We keep going. We keep repeating it. So we want to get as many turns as we can. Language is turn taking. So you speak, and then I speak, and then you speak. And as we're taking turns, we're building this interaction. Children, before they're verbal, are taking turns, and so we need to encourage them to take turns through any means possible. anything that's fun. I mean, I was working with a wonderful nonverbal boy and his father this morning. All of us were in the session together, and the boy wanted to go up. He wanted to jump, and we're looking at these picture cards, these verb cards, and he kept saying jump, and the picture was not jump. And I said, Dad, he wants to jump. And so we looked at the jump card. He was saying, jump, jump. And so we started jumping, and then we said, let's say big jump. And then he repeated big jump, and we go 1, 2, 3, and we lifted it up. That was Dad's turn, and he was doing big jump. But this is a wonderful way to build communication. Then later, he spontaneously said bubbles. So we got the bubbles out, and we're taking turns blowing and popping bubbles. So again, even if you're getting very little language, if you know the child likes something, if their eyes light up, you can give them the 1, 2, 3, and then wait for that. Give them a second. See if they say something. See if they tense their body, if they're ready, because that is a turn. And then jump up or go down the slide or whatever the fun thing is. It's finding joy in, and I think it's tough for parents because so often we're frustrated. We're like, oh, why isn't my child talking? What can I do? And it's finding that the joy in the moment of, children are there to play. Their job is to play, and the more we can show them to play. And as adults, we sometimes forget how to play, so we have to get back into the mindset of a child.
Right.
Sometimes I'm too much in the mindset of a child. I just like to play because it helps kids so much. It's incredible.
Right. I know. We like to play too, but we have to sometimes put stuffed animals away.
Yeah, and sometimes we do taxes.
It's adults. So I do think this idea of offering opportunities is actually really important because I actually hear parents say this. I had this one grandma who's great once who made the point that her adult son spoke late. And she said, finally her pediatrician said, well, the reason he isn't speaking is because you answer all of your own questions. You ask him, would you like some water? Oh, yes, you want some water. And so because she never would give him the opportunity. So when he finally started speaking, he spoke in full sentences because he finally had an opportunity to say something. And so it is, I agree with that, taking turns and offering the idea, and then but also repeating it over and over and over. And so we know that the more you read to them and the more language that they're exposed to, the better their language skills will be.
That's a huge thing. We don't always know what causes speech language delay. A lot of parents ask me why. We do know a few things. We do know it's correlated with number of books in the home, strangely.
Okay.
And there's a genetic correlation as well. So some parents who were late talkers, stuttering certainly appears to be genetic. When parents stutter, a lot of times the kids or the grandkids have stuttering as well. So it's not always genetic. We really don't always know what did cause the language or speech delay. But it's like you said, Dr. Leonard, some kids are speaking in full sentences. Like Albert Einstein, it's reported that he started talking. I think it was at 3, 4, 5. He was older and he was silent till then, and of course he was a genius. So it's not always a strong. It's one of the strongest markers of language that we know for young kids because we don't have other ways to test them. There is ways to test nonverbal intelligence, but it's as children get older, it's you never know what they're going to do.
Okay. Okay. And what is the another question I have is what's the most when you're little? What's the most difficult sound to make?
Like an R, probably.
R.
Yes, R. You would not expect a 2-year-old to make an R. If that comes out as a W, you're doing well.
Oh, really?
That's
okay.
Great. Yes, yeah, an R. For a 2-year-old. So R is a later developing sound. TH is another later developing sound. So those are some that are less concerning.
What are some that are ones that are concerning? So if you get to a certain age and you can't make a certain sound, then you're like, maybe you should see a speech therapist. And that's another good question. Is just like from a parent perspective, because oftentimes the pediatrician will say, maybe you should see a speech therapist. But I have to say a lot of times I have parents who come to me by even 15, 18 months saying, do we need to see a speech therapist? And so what would be your answer to that?
So the way that we think about speech sound development in speech therapy these days is it's called phonological processes. And so what that is children learn sounds in a certain order, and they learn the sounds in categories, right? So our B sound goes B, it starts words like bat and ball. P sound is P, it starts words like pat and ball. But a lot of kids have what's called phonemic collapse, and that means the two sounds are not different in their brain.
And what's that called again?
Phonemic collapse.
Phonemic collapse.
That's a fancy word for they're having trouble differentiating between those sounds. So instead of cat, it's tat, right? The cat is the tat, the dog is the gog. So what they're doing, a lot of times what that is that G or that T at the end, they're putting at the beginning because it's easier to say that same sound twice. So they're going tat or gog. It's not necessarily that they can't say the k sound for cat or the d sound for dog. It's just that because of that word, they're putting that sound in that place. A lot of times when kids are unintelligible, the best thing to do is to get a speech evaluation because what we can do is determine what the patterns are. And once you see the patterns in the speech, then you can develop therapy around that and build. It depends on if they have a language delay. So if they have a language, first we're going to build language, and then we'll address the speech. Because you want your child talking before you start correcting their speech.
Oh,
Otherwise,
okay.
it becomes very frustrating for the child.
So you're actually happy with GOG for the dog then?
If we're starting,
so we wouldn't call that necessarily a delay. That's more of just a speech issue where they're reversing it.
They're reversing the sounds. It could be a speech issue. Depends on the age. If you've got an 5, 6, 7-year-old saying GOG for dog, yeah, that's an issue. Yes, but for a 3-year-old, it's not as big of a concern. A bigger concern for a 3-year-old would be something like, hey, he's only saying single words. He's just taking my hand and bringing me to the fridge and showing me what he wants. He's crying all the time, and I don't know what he wants.
Or he only echoes.
He only echoes. He's only repeating. Yeah, and the echolele kids are, and echolele is a good place to start. But from there, you do these turn-taking activities, and then you can start, basically teaching within the context. So then, when he says want cookie and he gets a cookie, boy, is that rewarding. Like think about that. The first time you say want cookie, you get a cookie. Like, whoa, I just got something. All I had to do was say it.
I just need to point out that our next lecture's on Thursday, and it's the nutritionist, and I'm not sure how she feels about want cookie being the first thing. So we'll talk about that later.
Maybe apple.
The picky eater. Oh gosh, all they want is cookies now.
Yeah, that is a tough thing. Yeah.
Okay, we had another question. If my child has any lisp, should they have a speech therapy? And so I'm going to tie into that question afterwards about tongue ties.
Okay, sure.
And I actually used the word tie in there, so that's pretty good.
Great.
Lisp.
Let's start with lisp. So there's different types of lisps. There's the frontal lisp. That's where the tongue is just sticking out in the front. And there's the side lisp, the lateral lisp, where the sound is coming out the sides of the mouth.
Oh, okay.
So big difference there.
Okay.
It depends on the age of the child. Again, one thing you can do is you can model the production. So I've actually got a YouTube channel with videos, and invite anyone watching to check out our channel. It's Life Skills Therapy at youtube.com. You can just Google us.
We will share that so you can look it up.
We've got a great video on the S sound, and so for the S, what I recommend is you teach the child to close the teeth, smile, and then sun. And you can talk about, all you need to do is really find one word that works. If you find that one word, you can build the speech on top of that.
Okay.
Because it's sort of like, once they've learned that one word, you can say, wait, is that a thun? I do a lot of just pretending to be stupid, essentially, pretending to be silly, and be like, wait, a thun? What's a thun? I don't know. Did you mean sun? And then it's so silly for children. I mean, they laugh, they're cracking up.
Right.
But the more you teach them this, then you say a thun, and they might say sun, and they show you that. Later, you can then say, that's the same S like your friend Sam. And then instead of saying Tham, they might start saying Sam, or they will start saying Sam. But it's a matter of, it's teaching motor planning. Again, the question goes back to, is the child confused? Is the S really a TH, which could be that phonological process I talked about, or is it simply an articulation problem where the tongue is thrusting forward and then making an S? Again, an evaluation could tell, but as a parent, you can just start working, practicing, find one word that's an S word, teach them to close their teeth, tongue up.
Now, so the difference, is there one list that's harder to correct, like the frontal versus the side?
The lateral lisp tends to be a bit tougher, but it depends on the kid. Each child is unique, so you never know. I think there's really something to finding what motivates the child. If you can find a word that motivates that child, and you can give them a reward activity based on saying that word, it's conditioning and it works. I mean, it really does teach children to make that word correctly, and speech sounds can be corrected much quicker than language. Language delay is a little bit tougher.
Okay.
I'd say it's much more important to address. And one of the things you brought up earlier was receptive versus expressive language.
Yes.
And that's the first thing I try to figure out when I get in there. If a child has a language delay, is how much are they understanding? Let's start there. So we always kind of address the receptive component first to see, are they following directions? Are they understanding routines? Are they able to identify different things? If you hold two objects up and you say, where's the ball, can they find the ball? If you say, where's the gray elephant versus the blue elephant, or things like that, are they able to identify which one has a certain characteristic like color? And then from there we can build on, start looking at expressive language. How many words are they putting together? What's the vocabulary? How broad is it? What are they using language for? Are they using it to ask, to negate, to show interest in things? Are they using it to take turns? So there's many components of both of those, but it's very important to address receptive language.
Right. So going back to the lisp, tongue tie.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts on tongue ties? I feel like everyone has a tongue tie, actually, kind of in a way. And so Now, the reason we address it in little bitty infants is because usually they can't latch appropriately, and
Yes.
so it's going to affect their feeding.
Yes.
But then for the babies who do latch appropriately, but who do have a tongue tie, the parents are like, should we correct this anyway?
Mm-hmm.
And will it cause speech problems later? And do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely have thoughts. I actually just spoke with a mom yesterday about this.
Yes.
And she said, my kid has a tongue tie, should I be concerned? But he was able to latch, and the kid's older now. And I said, the important thing, as you mentioned, is are they able to latch? If they're able to latch, from an infant standpoint, yes, that needs to be addressed. As they get older with speech, there's generally not actually issues with speech and tongue ties.
Oh, that's good.
It's very interesting, but believe it or not, you can make any speech sound regardless of dentition, tongue tie. I mean, you could have a very severe tongue tie, but that's a very small percentage of cases where the tongue can't elevate. You can make an S with the tongue down, sun, versus tongue up.
Right.
I think like 20% of people make the tongue tip down.
Well, think about ventriloquist.
Yeah.
Right? Their mouths are completely closed the whole time.
Yeah, closed the whole time, exactly.
Pretty talented. Okay. It says, what can we developmentally expect kids to be able to say R's? Oh, yeah, we did address the R's. R's are hard.
R's are hard.
Thus, the TH's, and is that the L's?
And the L's.
And the L's. Okay, so R's, TH's, and L's.
So R's and TH's are generally around 7 years old is mastery. So I've worked with kids as young as 5 because the R is so off. They might be making a Y sound for R, but we see anywhere but 6, 7, 8, the R really should be mastered. And I've worked with a lot of 5-year-olds on R's just because it can really affect the intelligibility if the R is. There's different ways that it could sound incorrect. A W for an R, like wabbit for rabbit, isn't as bad, but if they're saying a Y for R, there is a concern there, like yabbit for rabbit. The Y for L sometimes pops up as well. L is usually mastered by 4, 5, 6. Again, there's a range for this, but those are tougher sounds. And the L sound I show by kind of putting the tongue out. I go light. I stick my tongue out. I say, let's stick our tongue out. Let's make an L sound light. I do a lot of pretend play, and I'll incorporate cards or repetition of sounds in that play. So many sounds are easier to produce at the beginning of words. So we work on word initial productions like light. For the R, the R is a very complex sound. I encourage you smile. The tongue goes up in the back and down in the front, so it's a very funny look on your face when you like hold it out for a child. But what I do is I just hold that sound out and I have them imitate it because if they can hear it and see it, and sometimes I'll get my smartphone out too, and you put it on selfie mode, and that way they can see themselves, so they can see you,
that's a good idea.
see themselves, and they can copy that. And say, make this sound like me, light. And then you can, or the ladder, and then the little toys can climb up the ladder, whatever the case is. So again, finding a way to motivate that and make it interesting is helpful.
A mirror works just as well as
a mirror works just as well, exactly. We don't always carry mirrors around, so.
No, I know.
Yeah.
We don't have this anymore. Okay, what do you think, from your standpoint, is the most common reason for referral for speech delay? Is it more of the speech sounds, or is it actual, my kiddo isn't talking?
The more common referral is kids aren't talking. I have many children that.
And by what age should someone be already calling you saying, nope, nothing's happening?
I think early intervention is really important. If your child is delayed by 18 months, if you're not hearing like any sort of call from mama or dada by 18 months, it warrants a call. I've worked with children even younger than that. I work on swallowing as well, so I work with kids that have feeding disorders, that have difficulty with food texture, and we do an analysis of that. But generally, a lot of the calls I get are between 18 months to, I'd say, 30 months, 36 months. So the earlier the better. If your child's delayed, there's no reason to wait. I mean, it's really important. Think about all that we do with communication every day. It's what makes up our world.
Right, and I think what I see often in the office is just, and it's usually a boy. I know, I feel like I'm picking on the boys, but I feel like it's more common in some boys. And you can tell that they really want to say something, and they get super frustrated. They're just kind of and they're like, eh. And so they're kind of just mad and frustrated because they're trying to say, I want the ball, but nothing's really coming out, and they're 18 months or even almost 2. And so we're kind of really trying to strongly encouraging them to see a speech therapist and be evaluated. And of course, we make sure their hearing's good and there's not fluid in their ears. And so medically, we make sure there's no reason they aren't hearing the words appropriately, because it's really difficult to make sounds if you're under a bathtub.
Exactly.
Right?
You're underwater. It's hard to hear,
So if you have tons of fluid in your ear, it's going to be really difficult, or if you have hearing loss or something else, it's important to check that out too.
Agreed. Yeah. If I can just interject there, one thing I'll also tell parents is that if your child is saying ball and he's 18 months and he's got that word, encouraging to say, I want the ball, please. That's just too much. We got to build kind of one step at a time. So
Right.
maybe ball, please, or want ball, then to 3 words, then to 4 words. And that could take, several months, but not necessarily withholding. We want to really celebrate and encourage communication. If your child's communicating, it's a big deal. And if they have these moments of frustration that we're seeing, the more that we can kind of look for opportunities to interpret what they're saying. Like I said, if they're babbling, it's something like we started with. If they're babbling or they're saying sounds that are kind of close to something that they're doing, we can just kind of say, oh, you said cookie, you said apple, it's like with healthy food, you said banana, nana, to give them the thing they want. And it's really important,
Right.
rather than, because we don't want to cause frustration.
Right.
We want to try to just think like a child and have fun with them, with communication.
Right, because don't forget, I think that they can understand when you say, oh, you meant this, or you said cookie.
Yes.
Even though they can't speak back to you, like their receptive language typically is phenomenal.
Yeah,
which is why I make the
usually
point.
ahead of expressive.
Right,
Yeah.
right, which is why I normally recommend, like, don't watch Game of Thrones with your 6-month-old. I feel like their
Don't learn
brains,
too much, yeah, that's
right.
not good stuff to
I think
learn.
that their brains are, like you said, such sponges for language and what's going on around them. And there's great studies that have shown that even babies understand right from wrong at a very young age. And so the whole idea of screaming in front of the child or watching violent shows or having negative language go into them or saying no constantly, it's my least favorite word.
Yeah.
We'll have to talk about that one day.
Yeah.
But it's more of really having more positive experiences with the communication.
Yes.
And
Oh yeah, it's got to be positive. And if I can just jump in, no is an important early word to teach a child, though,
Yes.
because more so than yes, you want to teach them no first so that they can negate. So they might not say yes, but they might say cookie. So do you want the cookie or the elephant? And then if they say cookie, you just give them the cookie. But if they don't want either, they might say no. So it just no is such an important word, and we don't like to say it to kids all the time. I agree with that,
right.
but we want them to be able to say it to us. And I wholeheartedly agree with the point about fostering a nurturing environment as much as we can. I mean, just doing things like going out in the world, going to the park, going to the zoo, trying new foods. Even if they don't like it, giving them an opportunity to try things and just we don't want them to feel like the world is a scary place.
Right.
We want them to feel like the world is a wonderful place where they're going to have a happy and successful life.
Yes. In general, it is.
In general, it is.
Okay, so how can parents help the child who's not yet verbally communicating, other than, I guess, really, at that point, they really should just see a speech therapist so that they can learn the techniques to maybe help them?
And I love working with these kind of families because there's no greater joy than to go work with a child who's going from nonverbal to first signs or first words. I mean, it's amazing. It's really heartfelt. But what I would say is, again, speak to a speech pathologist, but there's simple things. What I like to do is I like to show them the sign more. That's one of the first things we do. Yep. Just putting two hands together more. Yeah, exactly. I'm sure a lot of moms know that now because they encourage it to teach the children, but we want to teach them more so you can give them more of the activity they want, the thing they're craving. Starting by taking turns and giving them words for the things that they like. If they really like banana, you can show them the sign for banana, which is like you're killing banana. You can teach them the buh sound, buh, buh, buh. You can give them a cue by putting the lips up, pushing the lip up and go buh. You make the sound and encourage them. Oh, put your lips together. There's so many ways, but again, a speech pathologist can really help you identify what interests your child, so that we can build communication on activities that interest them and build language.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's important, like sign language is a language.
Oh yes, absolutely.
And like a lot of babies can even understand sign language and start to, it's kind of amazing how much they can do. And so it's one way for them to be expressive because their brain just has not really gotten around to the part where they're actually going to say words.
Well, and gross motor
is
so much easier to do than fine motor. This is a very, fine musculature in our mouth, with our lips and our tongue. And so with just putting your hands together to say more, wow, that's amazing. I mean, to teach a child that, or this for car. I mean, kids love car toys, boys and girls. And I've got all these pullback ones, and you let them go. And so, you can do more car. And then basically, they're signing two words. They might not be verbalizing it, but that's a big step. I've worked with kids that say, like, they might go like this, like, nay-nay. So they're asking more, and nay-nay might be the word for horse, more nay-nay. And so that's a way to bridge that gap between nonverbal language to verbal language and help them to start combining sounds and words.
What about the little kids who, and these are the ones that are we always have these red flags that we, go off in our head, but the child who is verbal, who stops being verbal. And so, I mean, that usually ends up needing more than a speech therapist. But I think for pediatricians, that's actually a big red flag. So once your child's really, I always say, once, it's kind of like doctors, and when you're in med school, it was see one, do one, teach one. Most people don't like to know that, but that's how it went. But that's kind of how toddler years are. They kind of get the see one, do one, and then they can teach their other little friends how to do that task. And so the same thing with communication. If they get to where they routinely can say those 50 words, and then in the next month they lose that language skill, for y'all as well, that's a huge red flag, correct?
Huge red flag, yeah, that's a big concern. And if that's happening, I would wholeheartedly suggest, reach out to your pediatrician, reach out to a speech pathologist and get an evaluation, because that's often kids like that, there's greater concerns than just speech delay.
Right.
And I'm not able to diagnose, but it may be autism, it may be some other PDD or something going on. So it's really important to take a look at that. I think, I'm big on all therapies. I think occupational therapy is huge. One thing that I've found is that I enjoy thinking about how a child's sensory world is, because a lot of these children live in this sensory world. And I'm not an OT, I don't pretend to be one on TV, but I've read enough about this and worked with enough kids to know it's an area that needs to be addressed. And so a lot of kids with who have the profile of they were talking and then they stopped, they've usually got other sensory needs going on. And so there's finding ways to meet those sensory needs, talking to an OT especially, can be a great way to help bridge that gap. And it may be things like helping them with rebounders or swinging, jumping, finding it. And I turn these activities into communicative activities. So if your child's doing something like shaking a toy because they like the way it looks or sounds, then I might take it and say, my turn, and then I shake it, and then give them a turn, give it back your turn. And so that way it starts from like a stimming activity. If your kid's just doing this, you're turning that into a communicative activity because you're saying my turn, your turn. And then you encourage eye contact. Okay, my turn. You look for their eyes, because they might not be looking at you, they might be looking all over. So you might kind of get in their field of vision, like, hey, my turn. Then you take it, shake it, give it right back to them, take a fast turn. But yeah, that's, again, I reiterate, please reach out to a therapist and your pediatrician if that's a concern.
Right, like, so even those infants who get to 12 months who aren't babbling.
Yes, that's another concern.
All those things are things that are warning flags for us. And I strongly encourage parents, from birth, to make really good eye contact.
Yes.
Because I think it's important, and I think that's one of the earliest things that we start to see with kids who do end up having some issues, is that lack of that social interaction.
Yes. And
so part of that therapy really is actually having that social interaction.
Huge.
Talk, reach your baby.
Yeah, exactly. And just being present with them, looking them in the eye, and big smiles. Children love looking at your face as a parent, so be there with them.
Right.
Be there
so you
with
can't
them.
be in a phone.
I thought we might go there.
Which is where we've had some dilemma in this whole new generation, where they're growing up, especially the infants being born now. Think about it, like their whole life it involves some sort of device or something, and so the idea that they might start losing some ability to have social interactions with the outside world because they're in more of an inside world.
Yes,
and so
it's a
make
big
good eye
concern.
contact.
Yeah, and I'm really, I feel strongly that tablets are just not good for little ones. Up to 4 years old, they really should limit their use, and even younger. I have a big concern.
The Pediatrics would agree with you.
Yeah, I've read some stuff on this. It's not good for brain development.
Right.
Your child needs to interact with you as a person. The thing is, they're not able to differentiate between the screen and reality. So, our brains know that this isn't real. These fast scene changes that happen in cartoons and on a tablet when you're swiping, their brains are not really able to make sense of that. It just doesn't make sense to them the way that it makes sense to our brain, and so it's just not great for.
Yeah, especially for little ones, the current recommendation is like really 0 screen time, except maybe FaceTime with a grandparent who lives in another state. But other than that, really kind of limiting it. Okay, so a couple more questions. What frequency of speech therapy do you normally recommend? So say we have a kiddo who has language delay, and he's 18 months old, and he's not really making, how often do you think normally they need speech therapy? And then for how long?
Yes.
And I'm sure it varies based on.
It does vary. So you can see kind of how to change up the frequency of therapy as you go on. But starting off, I generally recommend twice a week.
Okay.
We see the most progress with kids as we start twice a week, and we just get that consistency. And a lot of it is building rapport with the kid. So I'm not the parent, so I can come in, and it's easier for me to do the therapy work, to lay the groundwork of repeating, of naming things, of making requests, and then teaching the parents so that they can do those activities. So the less often that we're able to build the rapport and the foundation with the child, the harder it's going to be for the parent to do that same carryover activity. As the child develops, then you may see the speech sounds have difficulty. But some kids are in and out of therapy relatively quickly, and they make huge gains very quickly. Some kids it takes longer, and it's just like I said, each child is unique, and the goal is to find out what motivates the child, and then just focus on building goals that address their communication needs.
Right. And so one of the things that's unique about Sean, at least, is that they go into the home.
Yes.
And so sometimes that is a lot easier. And because you can also see their environment and
Yes.
use their own, do their own tools, and so
they're super comfy. They're in their living room, and mom's right there, or the nanny's right there, and so I always call them. If the mom isn't present, I'll give her a call and let her know, hey, here's what we worked on. Here's the goals for the week. Here's our practice words. But yeah, it's great to be, I think, in the home. It's really nice.
Right. How much a nutritionist could go into everyone's home too, and go through all the cabinets, and
that'd be so cool.
That would be really cool. And I know when I do house calls, which I actually find pretty fun, but you do get a lot more insight because you see their environment, and so sometimes you tweak things or you discover things that you hadn't thought of before because of the environment.
If I can jump in just to your point, so we do tend to reduce frequency of therapy as things go. There's some kids that I've worked with that were severely delayed. They make up, so their standard score shows kind of where they were at initially. As that improves and as they become better communicators, we'll reduce the frequency of therapy. We might only be going once a week, and then we might even go down to maintenance at some point. And then at some point they graduate. I've graduated lots of kids from therapy, and there's no better thing. I mean, it is amazing to see starting working with a child who was nonverbal, and then maybe 18 months later they're graduating. They're passing with flying colors. They're talking. And it's amazing.
Everyone's happier. What
Everyone's
about
happier, yes.
What about stuttering?
Oh, stuttering is tough. Stuttering is tough.
You think?
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on stuttering and speech therapy, and the best things for parents to do if they discover they do have one who stutters? And like you said, it oftentimes runs in families,
yes.
so they might have some experience with it. But stuttering.
Stuttering is so there's a lot to be said about stuttering for little ones that stutter up until, let's say, 3.5 or so. There's generally a window of, let's just let them stutter. Let's encourage their communication. I work with kids that have, let's say, hard time making their L or R sound, and they're stuttering a little bit. They might repeat a phrase like that, but then they keep going and they finish it. And so what I encourage parents is to kind of just give them the space they need to communicate and don't overcorrect the stutter. So we don't really want to bring too much attention to it. However, as children get to be a bit older, if the stuttering continues to persist, then it may be time to look at what we can do in therapy for the stutter. And one of the toughest things about stutter, and is the parents don't parent. Essentially, you have to train the parents. So it's a lot of parent training. So stuttering is, I show up and they say, help my kid with a stutter, and I say, cool, let's all sit down. We've all got to talk. And so a lot of it comes down to how we're communicating with the child. It's taking time to talk to your child each day, making great eye contact as you talked about. Lots of space. So after we ask a question, we might just wait. We might leave that space there, and wait longer than you think is necessary. We don't want to badger them with questions. And a principle of speech therapy that also applies to stuttering, and it's the same with stuttering and expressive language, is just that kids don't respond great to questions. And so what did you do today? How was Susie? Did you like lunch? Was the slide fun? It's too much for a child. They get overwhelmed with that. But comments are great, So as you're driving by something, be like, that's a cute doggy, And then it will encourage the child to communicate because there's no burden on them to, oh my gosh, I have to answer right now. What's going on? So that's, again, getting back to the stutter. That's a big part of it is not overwhelming them with questions, giving them space to communicate. Fostering a nurturing environment, and then from a therapist perspective, after we've addressed family issues, helping the parent create a more fostering and communicative environment at home, we can work on techniques, right? So there's things like if a child starts to, I'm going to stutter, but if a child starts to stutter, then you can do what I just did was a pull out, so you stop and then you just start the word over, and there's all sorts of other ones. I won't get into all the techniques right here, but it is typically warranted, and what you do is you train the kids to stutter, and then at some point they also have the choice. Some children never really outgrow stuttering, and so what I try to do simultaneously as I'm teaching them techniques is I say, hey, it's also okay that you stutter. There's no stigma about this. This isn't a bad thing. And so some kids become free stutterers, and they say, you know what, I'm going to go out in the world and I'm just going to stutter every now and then, and that's okay.
And I know a good number of doctors who stutter.
Yeah, there's so many successful people. If you go to the Stuttering Foundation's website, it's just got a list of celebrities. I mean, so many people, you know, who are super successful who stutter. So it's by no means going to impede their progress in life. But what could is, I think, a negative stigma in their mind about it.
Right.
And I also teach them techniques to deal with bullies. I mean, when kids are being stuttered, it's like, you know, hey, let's tell Susie at school, hey, that's not nice. You know, please don't talk to me like that. Something like that. And it works. I mean, it's really cool to see the kids' self-esteem go up because they're able, hey, it's okay that I talk this way sometimes. You know, there's nothing wrong with it.
Well, you did throw out a great parenting tip, which is one of my favorite ones, is I rarely, or I try so hard not to ask, how was your day? I think that is the stupidest question on earth. Like, everyone answers it fine.
Fine, yep.
I mean, most people don't say it was horrible, and then they go into this long drawn out. I mean, there's that one person. But most people just say, fine. It doesn't matter if it was good or bad. And so instead, like when you pick up your kiddo from school, say, if you're going to ask them a question, other than do you want to go get ice cream, which is easily answered, is if you want to open-ended conversation, is to say, what did you like best about your day? Or like, what did you like least about your day? Or what was so-and-so wearing today? Where it's actually a question that they have to answer in something other than fine, yes, no, that opens this line of communication.
Yes. Or even specificity. How do you like science class today? The thing that they like, you know, ask about that.
Right, instead of always asking just these generic, how was your day? And
super
so,
open-ended.
Yeah, so I always hate that. Even when adults do it.
Yes.
I always think it's kind of a waste of breath.
Yeah, it's not the most, it's not the most interesting question, like you said, because people tend to answer it with just fine. You know, and the people who go on the long stories, it's like, oh my gosh, you're not reading my social cue. You're supposed to say fine. Darn it.
So maybe that was the point, which you actually want them just to say fine and move on.
Yeah, so we've got to reprogram our brains to you know, I don't care more and connect more.
Okay, so I'm going to ask one last question because we're running out of time.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on pacifier use?
Okay.
I get asked that question all the time too, is will using a pacifier for a long period of time impede their ability to speak? And one point I make is only if it's constantly in their mouth and they never take it out to say words. But what are your thoughts? Do you have any thoughts at all? I'd like to ask the dentist about the pacifier.
Yeah, I think it would be great to talk to a dentist about that, but I don't feel strongly about pacifier. Now, I think during a speech therapy session, I was working with an infant last week, and the infant was, you know, this is a child who's inconsolable at times. He's crying a lot. He's not saying words. He's not even really telling mom what he wants. And so, but during the session, we're able to give him the pacifier. Now, this kid in a short period of time was able to learn to say more. So he's signing. He's not really saying words yet, but he's signing more. He's signing car. And so, oh, great, we're starting to get some signs.
So this is more of a toddler.
It was a little one. He's, I think, 15 months. So so pretty little. But as far as pacifiers, I don't think they're a major concern. Like you said, as long as it comes out enough for them to talk when they want to, that's what, you know. Yes.
Right, then that's not nice. Okay, so we can stress less about the pacifier that ends.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so thank you so much.
You,
we
Dr.
will
Lena.
add the YouTube video link.
Great.
So it sounds like you have lots of cool, fun stuff.
Yeah, lots of tips for parents.
And so, because I think that's the thing is, oftentimes we kind of say as pediatricians, sometimes we have to treat the parents too, because you know it's really a two-way street, and so we can't just treat the child. And so the same thing with a lot of the therapies they get. Like if the parents don't learn to do it at home, then it's going to be way less successful.
It's going to be way less, And it just showing the parent. I mean, there's no. I'm so happy about the joy that I see in the parents and the families. I mean, it's going from a child who's like not communicating and frustrated, mom's frustrated, dad's frustrated, to a fully functioning communicating child is an incredible experience. And you know, the parents play a huge part in that. And so I love teaching the parents these things because you know it works and it's brings a lot of joy to the home.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you. If y'all end up having more questions, feel free to send us an email or put them on the bottom, and we're really good at answering. But we'll add a few of these things on the link so that people can find those resources.
Absolutely. And you can find us at lifeskillstherapy.com. So if you ever, if you want to reach out to us, our email's right there, phone number's right there. We're always available.
Okay, good. All right, we're Ashley Pediatrician. Okay, all right, thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.